Let's talk drag racing alignment, because mine is goofed up. Front wheel alignment can be described with three terms: camber, caster, and toe. Actually, there's a whole lot more than that to consider in the front end of your car, but generally speaking, if you're dealing with a regular street car, you're going to get those specifications right and leave it alone. When we're building a car to handle, the thing we're looking for most is caster. The more caster you have dialed in, that is, the further behind the lower ball joint the upper ball joint is, the more your steering wheel will want to snap back to center and go straight. This can improve the feel of your car, when you're doing fun handling things like corner carving down a mountain or whatever. The camber angle of your front tires has more to do with tire wear than anything. Although in extreme handling situations like, drifting and such, camber in your wheels can help, I guess. I don't know, I wouldn't know anything about that. That third term is toe in. Now, generally, you want your front tires towed toward each other just a little bit. Now, multiple people have commented on my series talking about drag racing the Demon and said that they wish I could get a hold of a copy of the Bible. What, you mean this thing? The period printed direct connection book? Came with the car. Anyway, here in the front suspension racing manual, we learn that 0 is the ideal toe setting, with a 1/16 of an inch toe in being the maximum. But there's something even more important than that. It's getting the geometry of the tie rods correct in relation to the ball joints, such that as the suspension travels, as it will be doing down the drag strip, the front is going to rise. Toe needs to remain at 0. This is a quick trick. Well, it's most of a quick trick. The quick trick is a home alignment tool. You can at least get kind of sort of close with this thing. It's probably not as precise as the fancy machines, but pretty cool. Definitely better than just doing it by eyeball, Anyway, the quick trick is currently giving me bad news as far as my toe is concerned. The other day, I raised the nose of the Demon somewhat. I did that because I noticed it was extremely low. It was only about that far off the lower bump stop, and that seemed too low to me. In talking with Dale today, I learned that he always said it that way, and it worked pretty well. I mean, judging by how it would pull the front wheels off the ground, it was probably fine at that height, but anyway, I thought I'd experiment with it a bit. So here's what happened. I cranked down the torsion bar adjuster just a couple turns. Not very much, just a couple turns. It raised the suspension to where you see it now. When that happened, the toe changed radically. It's now towed in like, an inch? So apparently the tie rod angles are wrong. The book gets way too scientific about checking all of this. They want you to draw a chart and plot it at different points in the suspension's rise, and that'll tell you, give or take, what's wrong. I don't feel like drawing a chart, but I am going to kind of sort of go through their procedure. Obviously, I'm not holding the tape measures tight right now, but that's very close to the reading I saw when I did. It is 69 and a half or 3/4 or something at the front and 70 and a half at the back. So that's an inch of toe in. I guarantee it wasn't towed in that much before. So let's see what happens when I jack it up another inch. Well, now I get 69 and 70. It's still towed in an inch. Sure, that's an inch. Yeah, now it's towed in an inch and a half. Yeah, so this chart here matches exactly what I'm seeing, except I'm seeing way worse. Now, jounce is suspension compression, and for drag racing, we're not interested in that at all, really. We're interested in what happens here when the wheels drop out of the car. The front of the car lifts. That chart corresponds to this section, outer tie rod too high. Another factor that's important is that the tie rod is the same distance from the ground on both sides. I measured to the top of the steering arm because that seemed like a consistent point. I got 9 3/16 on that side, 9 1/8 or so on that side. What's a 1/16 of an inch among friends? Well, I did two things. First, I took the turns back out of the torsion bars. Remember, I did take some weight off the nose. It still sits a little higher. I've rolled it back and forth. I've bounced it. I'm pretty sure this is where it sits. So now I've got the quick trick plates under the tires. I'm going to get that set up. And I'm going to see what the camber and caster look like now. The only way to change the height of the tie rod end without cutting or, crazy shims or other such science is changing the ball joint angle, which will change the caster angle. So I'm going to check and see what the caster angle is now. If it's tilted the way you normally want for a road car, I can tilt it back this way, and that will raise the tie rod end. Then we'll see if that helps the angle. I could be crazy, but it sure looks like the wheels are cambered out at the top. So pulling the adjuster on the upper arm on the back inward would correct that, improve the caster angle, and lower the tie rod at the same time. But we'll see what the numbers say. Why do I always wear my nicest pants when I'm working in the shop on the weekend? That's a big mistake. It's a new day, and a note. This is not a quick trick guide. You might learn kind of sort of how they work, but I'm not explaining every move I'm making here. There are other great videos to do that on YouTube, so if you need to learn how a quick trick works, go look it up. Anyway, I already eyeballed my camber numbers, and they're weird. 0.2 degrees out on this side, and 1.2 degrees out on the other side. Or is it in? I don't remember. Anyway, the point is they're totally goofy and wrong. I'm gonna eyeball the caster number now, and the way you do that is by hopefully getting the stupid thing that you just put new batteries in to power up, and then zeroing it at 20 degrees, and then turning it to 20 degrees the other direction, reading the number, multiplying it by 1.5. Would you be zeroed, please? Oh. Easy. Unfortunately, some of these actually bolt on. This one just hangs here with the magnet, but it's not that precise. Okay, so 0.2 times 1.5 is 0.3 degrees of caster. Almost none. Okay, so I can dial in a good bit more here, and I probably won't be able to pass like 2.5 degrees, but by doing that, I'm moving the knuckle this way and lowering the outer tie rod, which is what we need to do. When I'm doing an alignment, I always aim for the caster number first. Usually, again, for handling purposes, I'm trying to get as much caster as possible. So I usually set the rear cam bolt all the way in, and then I use the front one to get the camber right. I'll probably start with that here. These are not offset bushings, so we shouldn't end up with some crazy number like 6 degrees caster or whatever. We'll see what we get. Also, and this is probably obvious, but I need to get both sides even. I can almost guarantee it's gonna take me several tries to do that. Did you know there's very little room to reach the camber bolts on an A body? On a B body, you can access one end of them here under the hood. Way too easy. Now, do not take this as gospel, but usually what gets me really close on the alignment machine is setting the rear camber bolt all the way that way, and then the front one straight up and down. Both of these bolts are straight up and down. I don't know if you can see that back one. So maybe this one just stays there and we crank that one in, and then we'll see if it just magically works. Now again, according to the direct connection book, what we're going for here is lowering the outer tie rod. You can see the knuckle there is mounted solid to the two ball joints. So if that ball joint moves rearward, it's gonna angle the knuckle like this, and the outer tie rod, which hangs off the back, is gonna get closer to the ground. The adjustment on that bolt is all goofy. It's not the straight up and down that I usually go for. I'm gonna tweak it to there, reef it down, and then move to the back. Again, with the weird way the numbers looked on this side. Yeah, the top of the tire is in, so that right there could explain it. Did I say the tire was in? It was out. Whatever, listen, we'll check this again in a minute. Yeah, so for as loose as that front one was, the rear one required this and barely went. All right, I have not set the camber on this tire yet, remember. I've just run the rear cam bolt all the way in. Oh, hey, don't worry about that puddle. For some reason, the rear seal on the transmission's ruined now. Gotta change that. Anyway, conceptually here, I ran the rear camber bolt all the way in, still need to do the front, get that camber set, but that outer tie rod is now at 8 3/8 of an inch off the ground to the bottom of the steering arm, which is what I can reach from the front. And that one, which I have not adjusted yet, is 8 3/4 of an inch. So that swing on that cam bolt changed it 3/8 of an inch. Okay, we've got 2.1 degrees negative camber currently, which is not gonna work. That's too much. We're shooting for about negative 0.5. I've actually seen some people running this at 0 as well, and that would be okay, but I think 0.5 is what we want. So we'll get to that in a minute here. First, let's check the caster on this side now that I've made that adjustment by delicately zeroing the scale. With that much caster dialed in, it's now hard to actually reach 20 degrees back the other way, so that's fun. But I've got 2.1 multiplied by 1.5 again, 1.05, 3.15 degrees of caster, which is better. That's good. That'll help to snap the wheel back to center as well. But again, we're gonna have to take a bit of it away getting the camber right. Then we'll recheck the tie rod end, and hopefully it's still closer to the ground than when we started. Ooh, important point here. I goobered the 0 point because I made that change. So it changed where the wheel's sitting. So I need to do that again and double check. It's actually 4.2 degrees of caster. But again, that's with the camber set totally wrong. We are not going to get 4.2 degrees with these stock bushings. That just won't happen, which is fine. For this application, we don't need that much caster. All right, obviously my usual approach isn't quite gonna work on this car. I've got the front camber bolt all the way out now, and I only got down to 0.9 negative. So I'm gonna have to take the rear one in, out, you know what I mean, the opposite direction, just a hair to get the 0.5 number here. And that'll take away a bit of our caster, which again, we don't need that much caster. The goal was to get the tie rod down. And I can tell you, when I adjusted the cam bolt out to get our camber closer, the tie rod dropped even more. Now it's 8¼ inches. I still don't know exactly where it needs to be, but I do know it needs to be lower by the chart in the direct connection book. So we'll get this set right, and then we'll see what we've got. Pretty much that setting is gonna be optimal. There's not a whole lot better we could do. We could bring it back up and ruin our caster a little bit, but I'm pretty sure we're really, really close. Now, of course, I'll have to go mimic the exact same setup on that side. The tie rod height will have to be the same, which should give us the same caster, and we should be able to achieve the same camber. Meanwhile, I just got word my new drag radials are in 2 days early. So we'll go get those mounted, just as soon as I can get the front end halfway decent. I cannot stress to you enough how much of a pain this is on an A-body. It really sucks. The lower your car is, the worse it gets. It would be really nice if I could put it up on the 4-post, but someone left a crappy charger in the way. Hey, here's another note. I'm currently making these adjustments with the car all the way down. In a drag car situation, you really want to make your alignment with the nose lifted at least 1 inch, because that's the position it'll be running down the drag strip in. I will be double checking my work there. I just want to get it close. Steady. Very close. One more, and that should do it. Yeah, something like that. I didn't pay for this quick trick setup, which means I can tell you that this thing is really super annoying. It turns itself off all the time. And every time it does that, you have to re-zero it. I even changed out the stupid watch batteries and it didn't really help. Anyway, I just re-zeroed it and it changed the reading to 0.4. I truly don't know how accurate this is. Like, it's probably not very accurate. I did make sure this was level when I started, make sure it's all the way in square with my wheel. So I think the camber reading at least is correct, probably, but your mileage may vary. All right, in the 1 inch raised position, I get 0.2 degrees. That's still safe. I don't know how safe it'll be the higher it goes, but that's about right. Yeah, no, go ahead, turn yourself off, that's fine. Anytime you raise the car like that, make sure you give it a couple bounces before you check your numbers again. And if you lift the tires off the ground, you're pretty much screwed and you're gonna have to roll the car back and forth and start again. Oh yeah, there's supposed to be left and right levels. I only have the left one, I think, which kind of sucks, but you can put it on there backwards and it reads fine. Oh yeah, it's all coming together. Hey, make sure you check your numbers after you finish tightening your camber bolts, because otherwise they may not be right. And the measurement to the steering arm over there above the tie rod, like I was making before, ended up back at that 8 3/8 number. That's 3/8 lower than that side, which is still where it was when we started. When we started, they were pretty even. So, although again, this isn't 100% precise, we can be fairly confident that the caster is good, the camber is livable-ish, definitely at regular ride height, and still good at lifted height, and the steering arm is closer to the ground. Hopefully that improves the geometry here and will help the whole toe changing thing. We'll find that out in a minute as soon as I'm done setting this side. Hey, don't punch those screws. I bet that hurts. Yeah, I bet it does. Mimicked the front bolt setting on this side, so now I've got positive camber. I'm cranking the rear inward to get it to the negative camber that matches the other side. Well, we're close, but I can't quite get it to 0.5 on the driver's side here. And that's with this camber bolt all the way out and the rear one all the way in. Might be because this thing has seen hard drag launches and it's done wheelies before, maybe. So the frame rail is not exactly perfect. It's very close, but I'm probably gonna have to pull the front end, and that'll definitely end up in mismatched caster numbers. So before I do that, I wanna check the tie rod height. Well, all right, I've got 8¼ minus on this side now, so I do need to adjust the camber anyway to try and get that number to match. So we'll just loosen that front adjuster, back it off a little bit, shoot for the 0.5 and see what we get. Stay. All right, I think this is the best it can be. With the nose up, it's 0 camber both sides, so yeah, sounds good. Checking the toe now, but I did go back and check the tie rod height. The driver's side ended up almost 1/8 of an inch lower. Ideally, you want them the same. They're close, but not exactly. So I'm gonna check and see what the toe curve looks like. If it's close, like way closer than it was, I'm probably just gonna call it good because I'm seriously tired of messing with this. Now again, I'm not actively holding the tapes tight, but the measurements shown now are very, very close to where they were when I did, so good enough for demonstration. This side is 67 and not 3/4, but 13/16? Yeah, sure. And this side is 67 and 15/16, or even a hair more. So they're currently toed out like, is that 1/8 of an inch? I don't know, they're toed out slightly. So I need to loosen the sleeves and lengthen them, and that will close the toe at the front. Now remember, we're looking for 0 toe, give or take. We can deal with just a hair toe in if we have to, but we want 0. And then we want to lift the front end again and still see 0. I don't know if we're gonna get that or not, but it can't possibly be worse than it was. So I tried to split the difference to get it even because my wheel was centered, still is, but I think I made a measuring error. Either one of the brackets wasn't down tight or something, because I made the change that looked like half as much on this side, then I made the same amount of change on that side, and then it was toed in 1/8 of an inch. I don't know. Anyway, reset the brackets, reset the tapes, and now I'm gonna do it a second time. Okay, here's where we're at. At ride height, the toe is set dead nut 0. When I raise it an inch like this, raise the body that is, the toe goes to 1/16 of an inch toe in, which is still safe. That does mean the toe is gonna go farther and farther the higher it goes, but it's so much better than when I started. This should at least mostly consistently go straight, and I'm happy with that. Hey, yeah, big improvement here. So now we're way up, like 2.5, maybe almost 3 inches, and it's still only just over 1/16 toe in. So yeah, this should work pretty well. Yeah, wheel might be a little bit off now, but frankly, I'm not really concerned. Now I'm lucky to have Dale as a resource. I knew that 0 toe is how he set the car up, and that's how I wanted it, but I did not know everything else that was in the direct connection book as far as the tie rod angles and heights and all of that stuff. It makes good sense, but you really got to wrap your head around it. If you're setting up a Mopar for racing, seriously, get the direct connection book or the Bible. It's great. I mean, there is an endless string of useful tips like that in here. Now, before you go try and pull wheelies on dirt, make sure you do a nut and bolt check of everything you just touched. It would be really inconvenient if your suspension fell apart off the starting line. Now, I'm not done. I still need to decide which front shocks I'm screwing on this thing, which is this whole other subject. Figure out that transmission leak. Oh yeah, and build an oil pan. Unless I can find one to buy. So far, that's not looking too good. But I am trying to test this thing change by change, so let's see what we got. Hopefully, when I pin the throttle and the nose lifts, it continues to go straight. And if it does, I'm gonna call that a big success. I know this will come as a shock, but the car runs better with the distributor cap screwed down. Here's an interesting comparison. Maybe 6 inches back from the front there, because the nose on the A-body is so much longer. Notice the Challenger's way taller. And, similar in the back. They might be the same length. Wheel straight-ish. Of course, the road's crowned. So far, seems straight. Now remember, I'm still breaking in a shiny new center force clutch, so I can't horse around too much. We can get into it a bit, just no big smoky burnouts or anything like that. Wheel's a little off toward the left, but it's pretty good. I could fix it if I really cared, but I really don't. Yeah, we'll again, my foot is hovering over the clutch pedal, not riding on it. I'm not a complete moron, just kind of a moron. Keep that in mind. Okay. It went straight. Double check what the caster number actually ended up being. I'm gonna guess 2.5 degrees from what I was seeing. It's probably pretty close. Try not to get T-boned. That would put a damper on my racing schedule. The alignment, but it did. It happened. You saw it happen. Anyway, for now I'm happy, so I'm gonna head over and get my tires done. It's kind of just a pleasure to drive. It doesn't pull in any direction. I knew the wheel thing was gonna happen because I made unequal changes left and right. They were really precise changes. I need to take like a 1/16 of a turn or an 1/8 of a turn from this side to that side or whatever. I don't care. It's fine. I'm just giving these guys way too much money lately, but it is what it is, you know, because race car or whatever. What the heck is this guy doing? I think he's lost. Yeah.
Just takes this side out and just pull it back. Just be safe.
Oh wow! Shiny new back tires. They say Nitto on them. Well, I can tell you right now they put too much pressure in them, but that's not surprising. Tire store. I can also tell you they're stickier, judging by how the moment I started moving, rocks were already sticking to them. Nice. Oh, good. The sidewall construction's a little different, so it actually rubs worse. And they put them at 35. Max pressure on these tires, according to the sidewall, is 51 PSI, which is crazy. Obviously, we're not gonna run them there. I set them at 25 for now because I actually need to highway drive this car tomorrow. You know, gotta break in the clutch and stuff. Oh yeah, remind me to get the entire driveway paved so I can stop driving my race tires on dirt and rocks. That would be ideal. Now this is a superior machine. Did I need to spend more money on tools? No, of course not. But in my defense, it's really awesome. Let's talk shock absorbers. And remember, drag car. This has nothing to do with what you'd want on the front of your car for going around corners, even just driving on a road. This is specifically with regard to drag racing. As I've talked about at various points in this series on Getting the Demon Ready, what's important here is weight transfer. You want the weight to be able to lift off the front end and plant the rear end. Now remember, I'm not an expert at like anything, but certainly not at shock absorbers. I don't know anything about the different fluids or gases or valving or anything. I just know what these things feel like when you test them by hand. These are the shocks I just took off the car. Funny enough, the driver's side shock is actually half blown out. There's oil all over it, and it compresses with no effort at all, but it's still super difficult to extend by hand. That's exactly the opposite of what we want. You'll notice there are no fancy 90-10 shocks, you know, drag-specific shocks that extend easily like I'm talking about and then compress more slowly. There are none of those sitting in this pile because I'm not that guy. I'm not gonna go spend money on them. And of course, here in the direct connection book, it makes no mention of modern drag racing shocks. The options it gives us are very tired 50,000 mile road shocks or shocks that have had the fluid drained out. It just so happens I have shock absorbers matching both of those descriptions. These are the worn out factory front shocks off Dylan Start Sport. Of course, they're getting replaced with nice fancy Bilsteins? I don't remember. Anyway, they do extend much more easily than those shocks, but they do still have some resistance. Now these are, I believe, the original shocks from the Demon with some extra ventilation added. When I referred to adding extra ventilation in the front shocks, in the video where I pulled the snubber and such, this is what I was talking about. Obviously, the commenters didn't get that because a bunch of people said, oh, you should drill holes in the front shocks. Yeah, I know. It's been probably 5 years since the first set I did that too. The direct connection manual specifically states that the totally dead shock may well be too loose for a high horsepower 4-speed application. Now we have a 4-speed. We don't have high horsepower. People keep asking me about that. It's somewhere between 300 and 400. I don't know. It makes some amount of horsepower and some torque. Anyway, I'm pretty sure we want the worn out high miles shocks. I've heard that in some cases, the drilled dead shock can allow the front end to bounce when it comes back down to the ground. So yeah, I'm not totally sure. I think I'm gonna try them both. I think I'll try those first and we'll keep these in reserve. Oh hey, if you're working on something that isn't a Mopar with a coil spring front end, no drilled shocks for you. You're not allowed to have that. Those will definitely bounce like crazy and try to kill you. Important note on this. Recall, I removed the droop stop to get more travel here. So, you know, if we're gonna pull wheelies or whatever, the suspension will fall out that much further, that much more easily. Because of that, the shock had a bit of a length problem. Of course, this is a factory shock. It was never meant to be extended this far. And the factory bushing, which is a little chunkier, was destroyed, let's say. So I'm using the aftermarket shock's bushing, but then the shock was like that much too short. If I had installed it that way and tightened the top up, it would have pulled the suspension up and negated the gain we'll have here. So just watch for that. In a situation like this, you want to make sure you've got a shock that will extend far enough so you don't lose your travel there. I can tell the difference already just by hand here. There's compression, and here's, you know, lifting the entire way to the car by hand. Yeah, I can't bounce it off the ground by myself, but it wants to fly. Now, did you notice I only had the front of the car jacked up on the lift there? I was able to open and close the passenger door with no effort at all. It just works. That's why subframe connectors are your friend. I gotta go for a late afternoon coffee run, you know, for reasons. So I thought I'd test the car one more time, see what we got now. Also, it got warm. It is no longer flannel weather. Now I am curious to see, with the mostly dead shock in there, what the front end does now. Still doesn't really roll that badly, and I think that's down to the 340 springs. I've got lots of experience in crappy A-bodies with slant 6s and no sway bar, and those roll like you wouldn't believe. Now, this isn't bad. I mean, it's noticeable, but it's not bad. Racing a stick car is just a battle between your rear tires and clutch. Which one will prevail? So no big smoky burnout. We'll just roll into it and see what the nose does. The best spot right here is partially around a corner. So, yeah. I'm not launching at a high RPM. I'm not launching at all. I'm just rolling into it. Haven't heated up the tires. Can't do a burnout. So it's not a really representative test, you know? But as far as I can tell, it seems to be working really well. It goes straight. It feels nice. I'm definitely not spinning tires out here at all. And the old tires would spin. 484 or so miles left to go before the clutch is good. Yeah, that's not gonna happen before I leave in 3 days. And I'm hitting the drag strip. So, yeah, we'll see what we can do. I just gotta keep driving this thing around and arbitrarily shifting gears, you know? Yep. Did you hear that ping a minute ago? I wouldn't worry about that too much. For as low of a compression ratio as this engine has, it sure does seem ping happy. I don't know why that is. Anyway, as you can probably tell, this is getting pretty good. I'm pleased. The alignment, super solid. Now, I'm no expert on that at all. I have aligned a bunch of these cars with an actual ancient alignment machine, but I've never scienced one for drag racing before. It wasn't as different as I thought it would be. You know, I basically went through the same normal procedure and then set the toe to 0, and it got me right where it needed to be. But hopefully some of that is useful. And, you know, I'm not the only one learning today. The center force clutch is getting pretty grabby, so that's good. I think it's supposed to be pretty grabby. I think that about covers it for the front end on this car. So I want to recap the details just in case you're trying to replicate this for your own classic style race car. Here's what you do. Drill your shocks, or get tired old ones, or spend money on 9010s. Delete the sway bar, although that is up for debate. Remove the upper bump stops or droop stops such that your control arm can drop out as far as possible. Ideally, get slant 6 torsion bars because they'll store more energy and aid in lifting the front. But I don't have that and I think it's fine. And alignment specs. About negative half a degree of camber, somewhere in that neighborhood. Caster does not need to be insane. 0 toe, or a 1/16 of an inch toe in. Remember, it's very important that as the suspension droops out and the body rises, the toe remains consistent. If it doesn't, your car's gonna dart all over the racetrack, and you do not want that. If you want more information on this, find yourself a direct connection book. Seriously, it's all in here. This is an amazing resource. Like I said, it's all in here. I'm in the chassis section and reading about clutch linkage. There's so much useful crap. It's ridiculous. Oh, I am starting my spare parts collection. Adjustable snubber, dead shocks, spare driveline, all good things to have. Got to find space for them in the truck, of course, but yeah. Shiny. This thing's dusty again. The paint looks really weird in this light, in the camera anyway. With all that said, as ever, thanks for watching. And remember, there's always a bigger fish